Who's going to be the X factor for Ole Miss in the big game on Saturday against LSU? And Drew Brees nominated for Canton, no surprise, but is he going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer? We're talking about that and so much more on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. And welcome back to the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. Another episode for you on a Thursday, getting that much closer to a big weekend of college football, namely the LSU Ole Miss game. That is the one that I think everybody's going to be focused in on. And we did get some news yesterday regarding who the starting quarterback is going to be for those Ole Miss Rebels. And that's kind of where I want to start off today's pod, because I wound up going back and looking at some film from the game last Saturday against Tulane, just as a reference tool, especially after seeing the announcement on Wednesday morning from the SEC teleconference that Lane Kiffin was indeed going to go the route of Trinidad Chambliss is going to be the starting quarterback for this one, his third consecutive start. And I was impressed with what I saw. Mind you, I feel like when you compare what Tulane's defense is to what I've seen from LSU 4 games in, they're a little bit different. You know, Tulane runs that 4-2-5 defense I was watching a lot of the highlights just to kind of get a reminder of what I saw last weekend against Tulane. And there were a lot of just big plays that he was able to kind of put together, one of which was a really nice long run in the first quarter. It was on an option, and the entire defense bit. Like, he had that left lane wide open. Their first touchdown of the game was a very simple, just curl route, and nobody was like. It felt like what I saw from that defense was very discombobulated on that play, because you had 2 or 3 defenders he was near, but credit to Trinidad, he was able to kind of thread the needle and find that spot. I liked what I saw from him in that first touchdown pass, and there was another one later on where I noticed that offensive line holds up fairly well. He had 3 Mississippi on a lot of those plays. You were able to see him kind of let the play develop, and he had enough time to get the ball off with some comfortability. Like, I think there's something to be said about that. That offensive line is going to be very strong. So I think that Ole Miss, the X factor for this team and how far this team can go. Again, this is the first time since 1959 both programs were undefeated. That was when Billy Cannon ran up and down the field, secured the first Heisman Trophy win in program history. And then obviously LSU wound up losing the rematch way back in 59 to Ole Miss, and Ole Miss became the national champions. A little bit more disputed than, Auburn's national championship, just because it was a lot different back then. It wasn't, the CFP and everything back in the gap. That said, I liked what I saw from Trinidad Chambliss. The guy has a motor on him. He can get it done on the ground and through the air. He had a lot of very explosive plays. A couple of them were luck-based. There was one really good tip drill where, the defender tipped the ball and guys literally right in front of it, and he got at least an extra 10, 15 yards after the catch. That's what you want to see if you're the Rebels, but I don't think you're going to see that many plays like that, where he's able to just sit back in the pocket against this LSU defense. This front seven is going to give him hell all afternoon. So if Chambliss is slated to start again, these reports kind of came through yesterday morning, and I gotta say, Harold Perkins better be having himself a field day against that offensive line and that quarterback. He better be after that quarterback all afternoon, because he's the biggest factor on this team. He's been the driving force. Whenever you are going for your third consecutive start and you're at home, this crowd's going to be rocking for Trinidad to get it done because LSU and Ole Miss, I talked about a lot. Historically, this is one of the most entertaining rivalry games because you have so much insanity that goes on in this one, and it's high stakes. I think we've seen Trinidad perform very well in the last two games he's had. This is going to be his truest challenge to date. But with him, I think this offense can handle the onslaught. Last two games, this team has put up 41 and 45 points with Trinidad versus 63 and 30 against Georgia State and Kentucky. Again, those are some really good numbers, no matter which way you look at it. Just absolute dominance from Ole Miss offensively. Now I'm wondering where the rubber meets the road because this will be their first true test all season. I mean, you look at their schedule, they beat down Georgia State and Tulane, but they were very competitive down to the wire against Ole Miss and Arkansas. It took a lot for you to beat Arkansas, who couldn't beat a drum in some cases this season. And it feels like Sam Pittman may be the next head coach to go. I mean, when you have Memphis losing to Arkansas 32-31, it's not a great look. But you look at that schedule, it's not necessarily a difficult slate. You look at LSU on paper heading into the season, that looked like a very difficult road to hoe through this week because you have Clemson, obviously La Tech existed. Florida you thought would be a lot better. It's going to be a fun ball game on Saturday afternoon, mainly because it's that like high-powered offense against a defense that has been able to play lights out and an offense that may have finally started to turn the corner. That said, I think it's more because of a really good running back in Caden Durham, but more likely than not, he seems to be listed as questionable according to the first SEC injury report that was released yesterday. But he could be anywhere from probable to out, according to Brian Kelly during the teleconference yesterday morning. So you got to think about that as well, is who do the Tigers rely on if Caden Durham is indeed out for this contest? Because I think this run game hasn't given you a lot of, great faith. If you just look at the way that things have looked through 4 games, there's not a true RB2 that's seems like that person is going to be a dog. Like when you look at the leading rusher, Caden Durham is by a wide margin. The guy behind him, Harlan Berry, has only gotten 15 carries for 87 yards. His average is a little bit better, but the only other guy, the guy right behind him, probably has a better overall yards per attempt, 8.6. He has 86 yards off 10 carries. But Jawan Johnson, he's been able to get things done as well. He has 2 touchdowns. But this offense, the run game has to be a little bit better because they're going to try and chew up one Garrett Nussmeier, especially if he's not necessarily as healthy as he's led on. Again, playing against Southeastern is probably a lot easier for him to handle. Let's see what he can do with the program and what he can do against a SEC top tier team, because I think Ole Miss is going to be a thorn in the side of a lot of players and a lot of coaches the rest of the year. They've got Washington State, then they play Georgia, Oklahoma, South Carolina, then they got Citadel. That's almost a bye week. Then Florida and Mississippi State to wrap up the year in the Egg Bowl. They have a genuine chance. I think even if this is the only loss they have on the season, I don't think that's going to be the case. But if they can beat Georgia, I feel like there is a genuine chance that we see Ole Miss and LSU in the college football playoff based off of what I've seen so far through 4 games. Will that happen? Probably not. But a guy can dream, right? That said, going back to what the Tigers need to rely on, you're going to have to see a lot more from Harlan Berry. Can he perform well enough to fill that hole that Caden Durham leaves? Again, he has the bulk of the yardage, 213 yards, 2 touchdowns. Can we see more from Harlan Berry? What can he do? I'm intrigued. I think he's going to be somebody to look at. Then you also have to kind of consider the possibility of throwing Xavier Thomas. I think you definitely see him being more of as much as I hate to play the jet sweep, but I'm wondering, can Juwan Johnson be a bell cow for this team? It's an opportunity for somebody to step up. It's going to be between Harlan Berry or Juwan Johnson. I think I'd much rather put my money on Berry to be the bell cow in this ball game. Now let's kind of keep this conversation going and flip it over to the pros. And I was blown away by seeing some of the nominees for the 2026 Pro Football Hall of Fame class and the ones that were chosen, mainly because it's kind of cool to see some of these names pop up, like Jake Delhomme, former Louisiana Raging Cajun, former Saint that played for the Carolina Panthers. They were one of the nominees heading into the 2026 Hall of Fame class. Again, it's a committee that reduces the candidates to 50, and then they whittle down to 25 and then 15 finalists, and then they vote on who gets in for the class of 2026. And obviously, with those 15 modern era finalists, the selection committee will consider 3 seniors, 1 coach, 1 contributor for the class. So between 4 and 8 members will be selected in the current format that it's in. So if you want an idea of who's available, who's out there in the first year of eligibility, it's Phillip Rivers, Alex Smith, Greg Olson, Jason Witten, Frank Gore, Drew Brees, LaShawn McCoy, David DeCastro, Marquise Pouncey, Geno Atkins, Jarrell Casey. Those are your first ballots. Then you have fellow Saint Jari Evans, Terrell Suggs, Darren Woodson, Marshall Yonda, Fred Taylor, Eli Manning, Steve Smith Sr., Reggie Wayne. That is a lot of all-time greats on the list. You got Larry Fitzgerald in there as well. So potentially, if you had to choose a total of 8 in this brand new format, is Drew Brees a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer? I think that's going to be a great debate we'll have a lot more as this kind of list gets whittled down. If I were to choose amongst the highlighted names, again, you've got 128 nominees from the modern era, and you got to whittle that down to the best of the best. I think Phillip Rivers is probably going to be one of those that gets overlooked into the second year and has a better shot there. Frank Gore. I think Frank Gore, just based off of the longevity of his career, deserves more of a conversation. Larry Fitzgerald, no doubt he is going to be in the NFL, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame as a first rounder. You also have Adam Vinatieri. Adam Vinatieri should absolutely be in there. One of the best kickers in clutch time in the history of the game. Eli Manning definitely has a case, but I think Reggie Wayne has a stronger case. I think Jari Evans is on the outside looking in. Again, this is just amongst the headliners that were talked about online a lot. So I think with all that considered, Drew Brees is more likely than not going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer simply because of the stats. I think there are some guys that are going to get their just desserts, but I don't think it's going to be the class of 2026. I don't think there's a reason why he should miss out on this opportunity. Again, Drew Brees, second all-time passing yards, 571 touchdown passes, a Super Bowl championship. That's going to separate him from Alex Smith and Phillip Rivers, as well as Greg Olsen and Jason Witten. You know, those guys are great in their own right, but they don't have that ring, especially in the quarterback conversation. I could say Eli Manning deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame, but it's more the latter half of his career was up and down, mainly because of the offensive line just breaking down for the Giants towards the tail end of his career. And also, I think Eli Manning might have had like a fairly average career at the end of the day. He had great moments, but it felt like outside of the 2 Super Bowl years, just didn't do a whole lot to really make himself a true, surefire Hall of Famer. Maybe next year. I think maybe 2027, Eli Manning gets in. Reggie Wayne being the perfect complement to Peyton Manning. Like, that man was an absolute monster for years with the Indianapolis Colts. I'd love to see Jari Evans get in, but I think he might be one of those that may not get a chance to be in that mix. You have Torrey Holt, also a potential Hall of Fame nominee. I feel like he might be missing out. He'll be close. He'll probably make it down to the final 15 again, alongside Luke Kuechly. But if I were to choose some of these like first ballot Hall of Famers, Frank Gore and Drew Brees, the two that stand out the most to me, alongside Larry Fitzgerald. The man was an absolute force to be reckoned with the Cardinals. And I think honestly deserved way more than just one Super Bowl berth. He just always had a great career from start to finish, especially for a wide receiver, played a long time, and the numbers speak for themselves. Same with Frank Gore. I think Shady McCoy would be cool to see, but I think he's going to be more like third or fourth chance to get into the Hall of Fame. Maybe one of the last chances he gets in, because LaShawn McCoy was great for his time, but I think Frank Gore, especially amongst the running backs, the fact that he was still playing in the NFL while his son, Frank Gore Jr., was playing over at Southern Miss is an amazing feat unto itself. In a world where running backs are a dime a dozen, and more importantly, they are usually wrapping up their careers by the time they hit 34, 35, which is crazy thinking about because I'm 36, and you're seeing guys kind of hanging up in that mid-30s range. Frank Gore's staying power is more than deserving of a Hall of Fame nomination. But that'll about do it for today's edition of the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast. We come back tomorrow. We're going to have a lot of fun and get into the predictions, put it all on the table for this weekend's action. So make sure you go check us out on social media, and also give us go ahead and subscribe over on our YouTube channel. You get some exclusive content on there as well. Until then, talk to you mañana on the Louisiana Lunch Hour podcast.